Let's time travel back to pre-modern Europe. People all over the world were making products, but Europeans were establishing methods of production and patterns of consumption that would influence the history of manufactured products globally. These practices are part of pre-modern product design models. This is an 18th century cartoon set in a barbershop where you could get your hair cut and get some teeth pulled too. Barbers in the 18th century did most of the dental work. Just look at all the things in the cartoon that are products, and that's everything except the people and the dog. There's a lot of stuff there, and it was all made by hand. In an 18th century world, products like these carpenter tools were handmade. So were clothing, shoes, rugs, textiles, tapestries, tools, metalwork, utensils, jewelry, and furniture. The people who made these were called artisans. In pre-industrial times, the poor made their own furniture and tools. They wove and sewed their own clothes. They often grew and cooked their own food. So if you were poor, you didn't have much in the way of products because you didn't have much money for anything beyond food and shelter. Since the poor had little money to spend, they were not a target market. This is important to remember because you live in a world where even poor people buy a lot of things. Many of the products that artisans made required special skills and training, sometimes special equipment like forges to make metal or looms to weave cloth. This is a jacquard loom. In the 18th century, weavers used these to make a special silk cloth with a raised design like the one you see. The very wealthy of Europe used jacquard cloth for clothing, curtains, and upholstered chairs and sofas. Families that specialized in those trades had an investment in their tools, and to keep the family business going, they trained their male relatives, their sons, their nephews, their cousins. This was common practice throughout Europe for centuries. If you were the son of a saddle maker, you were trained to be a saddle maker. You really didn't have any choice. That was your culture and your family and the only way you could survive. These are very different expectations and choices than makers and designers have today. Thierry Hermès opened his harness workshop in Paris in 1871, and he became known for the best handmade harnesses and bridles in France. 6 generations later, his company is still family run and makes some of the best and most expensive luxury leather goods in the world, including the Birkin bag, which retails beginning at $12,000 and has a 6-year wait list. By the 15th century, artisans across Europe had established guilds, which were independent organizations that provided training and set standards for the products they made. That included everything from textiles to stained glass, armor, furniture, jewelry, even sculpture. Guilds were run by a master who trained apprentices, accepted commissions for work, and sold the finished goods. Guilds were product, area, region, and sometimes even city-specific, which protected their members from outside competition. They also maintained very high levels of quality, since they usually had to pay a tax for the privilege of making and selling their goods in a particular area. Some of these products were very expensive, like silverware or brocade cloth, ceramics that were painted, glazed, and gilded, or elaborately carved furniture, like this 18th century roll-top desk. They were considered luxury objects, and only a small percentage of the wealthiest people in Europe could afford them. These kinds of luxury historical products we call decorative arts because they were beautiful, they were aligned with the reigning styles, but people also considered them useful. They had a function beyond being beautiful, and they were necessities for the very wealthy. Because they were so labor-intensive to make and so expensive to buy, people kept them and passed them on for years, even centuries. That term, decorative arts, only applies to historical luxury objects that were also utilitarian. Art historians coined the term to separate luxury objects from fine art objects. So today, that $12,000 Birkin bag is just an expensive bag. Same thing for top-end tennis shoes, jewelry, and furniture. The category of decorative arts pretty much stops with the Industrial Revolution. Decorative arts products could be made by one person or by a group. So a single craftsman usually made jewelry, like this 18th century gold and diamond brooch. Luxury furniture that involved a wood carcass, fancy veneered woods and inlays, as well as gilded mounts, was usually the work of 3 or 4 craftsmen who were skilled in one specific production practice. So they collaborated to make the finished product, and then they split the profits. Now, of course, there were always a few exceptions, and this chest is one. We know the maker was Charles Crescent. He was a Frenchman who was skilled in wood making, veneering, and ormolu, and that's the gilded brass fittings that decorate the chest. One man or a group, these commissioned products generally took months, if not years, to design and make. People were very accustomed to waiting. In France, the king owned the manufactories that made many luxury products, and everything in those manufactories was intended for his royal palaces or as gifts. Louis XIV established the Savonnerie manufactory for rugs, like the one you see here. He founded the Gobelin manufactory to make tapestries for his palace walls. Court artists came up with the designs and the scenes, but weavers hand-loomed them, and it took about 5 years to make a wall-sized tapestry. Louis entertained a lot, so he needed a lot of tableware. He established the Sèvres manufactory to make bowls and dishes and vases, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Some luxury objects were designed by a fine artist and then made by craftsmen who followed his cartoon, which is the drawing for a finished product. Now, that was the typical production system for the division of labor to make rugs and tapestries, which were some of the most expensive decorative arts. But don't think that all the glory was in making the design and all the drudgery was in weaving, which could take years to complete. This division of labor maintained a very high-quality level and always required craftsmen to innovate or experiment. They had to develop new dyes to match the cartoon colors, and translating a cartoon to a woven medium meant a creative transformation demanding knowledge and skill on the part of the weaver. Additionally, this meant full-time, long-term employment for craftsmen, which was very important. Throughout the 18th century, those guilds grew in response to demands from wealthy clients for more products and more variety. Eventually, guilds developed retail experts who specialized in working with clients for custom pieces, setting up shops where merchandise could be displayed. Those luxury shops were opened in areas of Paris and London that were close to the city homes of the very wealthy, and it encouraged shopping and browsing. Signage became very important to identify the various kinds of shops and to attract clients. Some of these famous shopping streets like the Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris and Savile Row in London maintain their reputations today as the most fashionable, most upscale retail areas. France dominated the luxury trade in Europe, and the French court generally set the styles for fashion. In England, the royal family had less money and political power, but the country's stability and huge overseas colonies and investments meant that there was a growing group of wealthy and powerful financiers who were interested in developing manufacturing and retail opportunities. This was a fertile environment for developing new products and finding backers to fund production. From the mid-18th century, investors, craftsmen, and merchants collaborated to establish companies and manufactories that produced products for both the wealthy as well as an expanding middle class. England will emerge as the first industrialized country in the world. By the end of the 18th century, there were two clearly identifiable trends in Europe. One trend was the noticeable interest in the relation between fashionableness and products. This was based on the increasing number of products available for purchase to a rapidly expanding market, to more rapid introduction of new styles and variations of products, and to expanded manufacturing. England had weekly newspapers that featured products and shared shop information along with gossip and the news. Women subscribed to monthly fashion magazines that crossed Europe, showing what fashionable women were wearing. There was a newly developed market for children's toys, clothes, and furniture. In France, the aristocrats were building lavish new townhomes, and in England, the wealthy were redesigning their homes to accommodate newly popular ideas about domestic life. All this rebuilding meant these people needed lots of new products. The second trend was a belief that industrialization and manufacturing would lead to more products, better quality, faster production, and steady economic growth. Some companies were already more successful because they were adopting new machines. They switched from cottage factory labor, where people made the products at home, to requiring employees to work in a factory setting. They began dividing up various parts of making a product, and they advertised more. The British economist Adam Smith, who is closely associated with free market enterprise, actively supported a production model that divided the labor among a variety of stages and workers rather than promote the single maker, single product system. That will become the norm. Conditions for success are never equal. Many people in Europe and the United States knew about the new inventions and moved towards manufacturing. But one country was able to take the lead, capitalize on industrialization, manufacturing, and marketing, and that was England. That's where the Industrial Revolution began, exploded, and set the standard for the rest of the modern world.